In today's video, we're going to discuss the future of PLD, Pierre-Luc Dubois, in Winnipeg. Maybe heading to Montreal. According to Elliot Friedman, he's 95% sure this is going to happen. Plus, could other Jets top players like Shea and Wheeler also end up moving this offseason as well? We'll discuss those possibilities. Plus, we have some more signings and some prospects, including Coronato in Calgary, some other injury updates and other news from around the league, including the Philadelphia Flyers, and a big update on the World Junior Championship team from 2018 that's been under investigation. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and some trade talk to take a look at today. First up, we do have news from the NHL waiver wire. The Nashville Predators have placed defenseman Jordan Gross on waivers. The 27-year-old has appeared in 15 games this season, putting up 3 goals, putting up 31 points in 45 games at the American Hockey League level. He's going to need waivers to be set back down after getting some time into NHL. So we'll see if he's picked up. This time of year, you don't typically see a lot of waiver claims, so we'll see where things go. Some other prospect signings, including a very prominent one that happened shortly after I recorded yesterday's video. Otherwise, it would have been included in that update. But the Calgary Flames have signed one of their top prospects, Matthew Coronato, the 2021 first-rounder who was taken 13th overall. Of course, has played with Harvard. Has since being drafted, he's 5'10", 183, gets his 3-year entry-level contract. Officially signed. There was some concern, I know, maybe not so much lately, about Coronato's ability to want to stay in Calgary and sign the deal. I know Harvard players, for whatever reason, there's been a trend of a lot of them not necessarily signing with the team that drafted them and end up going the free agency route, but we've seen a different trend here as of late with Coronato and some of his teammates actually going and signing with their drafted club. So we'll see what this does, but Coronato's a really good hockey player, potential real impact player for the Flames down the road. So there is an expectation that he very well could get into games this season. I know with head coach Daryl Sutter being there, it's difficult to say where things go with that. He seems to be quite reluctant, especially if the Flames are technically still in the playoff hunt and not eliminated. He doesn't tend to want to give a lot of playing time traditionally to younger players. We've seen like Phillips and Pelletier, etc. this year, we'll have a real hard time getting in and sticking in the lineup. So we'll see what happens. But either way, regardless of how much he plays this year, Coronato's a real bright piece for the future, and it's certainly a good piece of business to get him signed. Another college prospect who signed yesterday in Montreal, Sean Farrell's, went to a quick correction because there was tons of comments correcting me over a little mistake I made. I am aware that he is a forward, but for some reason, I think I had defenseman on the brain. Especially where yesterday we were also talking about Lane Hudson, the defensive prospect for the Habs, and I did refer to Farrell as a D-man when discussing his contract signing with the Habs, so I just want to correct that and apologize to the Habs fan faithful. Speaker misspoke on the position there, so just wanted to quickly correct that while I'm thinking of it. We also have another signing in Florida, and the Panthers have signed Zach Dalpe to a 2-year extension. It's a 2-way deal as well, $775,000. At the NHL level, and I believe the AHL salary over the 2 years changes between $300,000 to $400,000. So certainly a pretty lucrative AHL deal with the opportunity to get some NHL games in. Another signing in Philadelphia, they've signed Emil Andrea, defenseman prospect, who was 21 years old, played in the SHL this year. He was a 2020 draft pick, taken in the second round, 54th overall. His season in Europe has completed, and he'll be making the jump over to North America. Looks like he is going to have this contract kick in next season, but will join their American Hockey League affiliate on an amateur tryout. A few other roster moves today as well. The St. Louis Blues have sent goalie Joel Hofer back to the American Hockey League. The Devils have done the same with young goalie Akira Schmid. Obviously with Mackenzie Blackwood recently returning, created a 3-goalie situation, and Lindy Ruff didn't feel it was in his best interest to be sitting around idle, or he can go down and play a bigger role at the AHL level. Wouldn't be shocked, though, if Schmid does get into some playoff games with the team down the road. He's had a real nice part to the season when he's been called up and had a chance to play NHL games this year. The Flyers have also sent back both Forster and Zamula to the American Hockey League here as well. Some injury updates in Columbus. There's a long list of them, which continues to be a huge part of the problem that the team has had this year. Obviously, other things too, and they're rebuilding, but they would have been better, I think, if they could have stayed healthy, of course. Defenseman Nick Blankenberg is out week to week. Eric Branson's out for about 6 weeks with a separated shoulder, so his season's effectively over. and Matthew Olivier also out 2 to 4 weeks with a bone bruise in his leg. So good chance his season could be over as well. Other big news today in Philadelphia. Dave Scott, the chairman, has been announced that he is going to effectively retire here, which is not a huge shocker. We had heard rumblings around the time that Chuck Fletcher was let go that there was a good chance that there was going to be a change by Comcast from the chairman position, likely due to Dave Scott's retirement coming up. He's had 30 years with Comcast. It is opted to retire. I believe his retirement date is actually sometime in April. His successor, though, will not be officially taking over until July 1st, which is going to be Dan Hilferty. Hilferty is reported to be a huge Flyers fan, a lot more into the sport of hockey than some other guys like Scott have been. So I don't know that he's going to need as much of a supporting staff. I believe Scott had like a hockey advisor working with him, whereas I don't think that's something that Hilferty is going to require. It's also expected that he's going to maybe go in a different direction. I know Daniel Briere's used the word rebuild. And it's kind of expected that the group of alumni that kind of associate with the team that are still working in different advisor roles, you're talking about, Bill Barber and Holmgren and all those guys, that they might not really be looking to those guys for their opinions on things and kind of doing things in a different way. So we will see, but that's, more significant change in Philly. Still a lot of questions on who might end up being president of hockey operations. Of course, Daniel Briere is the interim GM, but expected to be the full-time GM in the not too distant future. Some thought maybe that the reason Dave Scott made Briere interim GM is so that his replacement could effectively review that and make sure that, that's who they want, making Briere their hire. So that's kind of that's his guy, so to speak, which I know seems to sometimes play a role in how people stand in the organization when there's change above them. So that could have played a role in that decision. But either way, it's expected Briere will be full-time, and they will bring in somebody to be the president of hockey ops above him. So we'll see where that goes, but I don't think they need to rush necessarily into that position. They'll make sure they find the right person, of course. And of course, John Tortorella will continue to have a huge voice with roster decisions to things like that, as well as they kind of change the culture and very much change this franchise that's been much needed for some time. Now, also some significant news reported by TSN's Rick Westhead today. The Heritage Committee from the federal government has directed Hockey Canada within 24 hours to hand over the law firm Heinen Hutchison's final report on the 2018 World Junior Championship team that's been under investigation after sexual assault accusations came forth quite some time ago. This has been hanging over this team and all the players associated with it for quite a long time. It was last summer, I believe, was when everything first came out. It's been a really long time. It's taken effectively all season. There really hasn't been much said on this in a long time. So obviously that committee wants, to see this report. So that tells us that the investigation on their end must be complete. I know there's separate police investigations as well. So I would hope that we can all kind of wrap this up, find out what the general consensus is as to what happened. Is there any guilty parties that need to be dealt with? And then everybody can kind of move forward. And, if the players need to be, obviously facing any discipline because of their involvement, then they can finally get that official and just have this wrapped up. Because I know for a lot of these players, there's been a lot of word that, like, for example, if there's a player that's connected to this team, even though they may have been assumed to not be guilty per se, teams are reluctant to make any trades for them or anything of that nature because they don't want to do a deal to get a player and then find out that they weren't given the right information, the player was guilty, and ends up facing a big discipline, or I don't know, like there could be legal issues. It's hard to say how this is all going to play out, but I can understand a team's reluctancy to pick up a player that's connected to this team, regardless of what is known or not known about their involvement, lack thereof, or what have you. I mean, it's just risky for the NHL franchises, so it'd be nice to finally, after all this time, find out what happened and, get consequences laid out for anything that needs to be dealt with. So hopefully we'll be able to do that here in the not too distant future. When it comes to the rumors of the day, a lot of it comes from Elliotte Friedman and Jeff Barrett's latest 32 Thoughts podcast that came out earlier today. Talked about the Washington Capitals. Now this is a two-parter here, kind of comes from Elliotte Friedman, a little bit from Emily Kaplan. Starting with the coach, Peter Laviolette. Friedman talked about that there's certainly some uncertainty over whether or not Laviolette will return as head coach of the Capitals. Apparently, early in the beginning of the year, there was some talks about an extension, but they seem to have gone cold. and there hasn't been anything new on the topic in quite some time. So clearly, with the season going the way it is, and Washington are very much at risk to miss the playoffs, a lot are wondering if maybe Brian McClellan, the GM, might be considering a change behind the bench. Well, Emily Kaplan of ESPN put out a report indicating who might be up for grabs for some of the potentially upcoming coach or GM roles that might become available over this offseason. And one of the names that she links to Washington, should there be an opening, is Spencer Carberry, currently the assistant coach with the Toronto Maple Leafs, but of course has tied connections back to Washington with working with the organization before at the minor league levels. He was a former coach of the year at the ECHL as well as the AHL, worked with the Hershey Bears. I know the Capitals and many people within the organization were very fond of the job he did, and certainly I think would be very much open to the idea of bringing him back. Of course, he's no longer an inside the organization kind of guy. Sometimes different businesses or teams have different viewpoints on promoting from within. Sometimes they'd rather bring an outside voice, whatnot. So he certainly has a little bit more of a different, experience on his resume after working with the Leafs for a while. So we'll see where that goes. So should Peter Laviolette not come back as coach of the Capitals, look for him to certainly be a candidate for sure, if not maybe even a leading candidate for that potential job. I believe he's had his name thrown in the hat for a few of the other coaching jobs that have come up here in the last little while, but obviously wasn't the successful candidate. It remains under contract working with the Maple Leafs. Of course, they talked further on that podcast as well about the Kuznetsov situation, which we've touched on over the past couple of days as well. Don't really have a whole lot of new to add to that, except for the fact that obviously Friedman said that he feels that the Capitals and Kuznetsov have been working towards a divorce for the better part of a couple of years. He has not been the same consistent player that they were hoping he would find his game again, I think at that high level like he had when he won the Cup. And that's obviously part of it, amongst other things off the ice and stuff. So certainly, expect there to explore the trade market for him for sure. I believe that he's requested a trade like he did a couple of years ago. So we'll see if they can finally find that out to be and get him a new home and a fresh start. I know we've talked about Pierre-Luc Dubois as recently as yesterday, because there was other reports from Montreal media talking about potential trades between the Habs and Jets and speculating over what they would be willing to do to get Dubois into a Habs uniform sooner than later. And normally I wouldn't be talking about him here yet again today, but this information from Friedman is pretty substantial. I mean, he goes on to say that talking about the Jets and their potential changes we might see, he says he believes there's like a 95% chance that Dubois ends up in Montreal, and that there's a good chance that he ends up there via trade this offseason. He also says he believes the Jets and the Habs have indeed had talks about what it might take to get a deal done to get him to Montreal sooner rather than later. The Jets certainly acknowledge the fact that Dubois and his camp are pretty much holding their ground and making it, setting the stage for him to make his way there anyway. So they might as well try to move him to get something back that they like and can use for their franchise, as they're going to be obviously, probably going in a little bit of a new direction. He feels that there's a good chance we could see other changes within the core of that team. They discussed the fact that the Jets core group of guys, at this point, it seems like they might have gone as far as they can go, at least as is, and that changes are very likely to take place. You're going to wonder about the future of Blake Wheeler, Mark Scheifele. Not to say for sure that they're all going to be moved. I'm not sure that's going to be the case, but I do think it's very much a possibility as Scheifele and Wheeler and now Dubois all end in the year of their current contracts. That is certainly a real possibility that any or all could be moved. I think Dubois is the most likely, given the fact that they know he doesn't want to sign long-term. But you have to wonder, especially how last season ended and how things went with Scheifele, that you get to think that there's a real chance here that some of these guys might all want a fresh start. And I don't think it's a case where they need to blow it up per se. They still have some real good talent there, and they should be able to get some good returns for some of these players, and hopefully they can remain competitive and move forward. But the one big piece as well you have to wonder about in Winnipeg, should some of these other core pieces start to move, is Connor Hellebuyck. He's made it known before that he's happy to stay in Winnipeg and compete with this group of players, as long as the team remains competitive, because there was some speculation, over the last couple of years about, other players maybe wanting out or whatnot, and he always said, that's kind of where it was for him. But many have said on the insiders and reporters that have talked to him more off the record that, they get a feeling that Hellebuck's not going to want to stay if two of these other core guys go, and he doesn't feel that the team is going to be as competitive for a while if they need to take a big step back. That could be a tremendous big piece of the puzzle here that could ultimately get them a good return, but it could set them back as well, depending on really what direction this team goes. And Hellebuck's a heck of a goaltender, and would be a lot of teams interested should they become available on the market. I mean, between Hellebuck, Wheeler, Scheifele, Dubois, there's a lot to like there. You have to think the returns could be quite good, but at the same time, how much of this is going to be able to get players that are going to be helping them be competitive today, or is it going to be more future-based returns, where they're going to have to basically kind of accept the fact that they might need to go through a rebuild? It's really hard to say the direction of this team beyond this current season with so many question marks and uncertainty. But with Dubois and Friedman acknowledging here that the discussions have taken place, and it's a 95% chance that he's going to end up there anyway, you have to think that the odds of getting Dubois to Montreal this offseason are extremely high. It's just a matter of what the return is going to be. We had talked before about Kirby Dach being a trade piece. We had talked yesterday about Georges Larac saying that he would trade Lane Hudson, which is a top prospect defenseman, which would be risky, but you're getting a really good player in return. They certainly have some other interesting prospects as well. I know at one point, I'm pretty sure I even heard some Montreal media say they would trade Caulfield. I don't see that happening. That would not be a case for sure. But still, at the end of the day, what do you think is fair? I mean, Winnipeg's not going to have much leverage here. Montreal's going to have all the leverage. I think they will give them something that's going to help Winnipeg, but I don't think it's going to be anywhere near what they would like to get or what they would normally get on the open market, especially when they traded Patrick Laine for Dubois services. So let me know your thoughts on all of this news and what kind of deal could we see between the Habs and Jets for Dubois this summer. Let me know your thoughts on that, and we'll discuss down in the comments. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.